A 96-year-old has become the oldest woman in the UK to be convicted of causing death by dangerous driving after she lost her control of the car and it mounted the pavement, killing a woman and injuring another. Currently, there is no upper age limit, although drivers aged over 70 must apply for a new licence every 3 years.
But could more tragedies on our roads be avoided if we were to ban over 70s from driving? Former UKIP leader and barrister Neil Hamilton thinks this would be ageist. Drivers should be judged on a case-by-case basis. But Sister Paul Britton doesn't think so. Paul Britton is going to say all over 75s, just banned from the roads, stop them driving, massive clampdown. Paul, defend it.
What a great intro. So, yes, absolutely. I mean, the story that's in the paper today is, you know, is a story that represents how dangerous older drivers are on the roads. Look, someone has died. In life, you only die once. It's the end of it. I know we're going to hear arguments.
Hang on, sorry, but people die every day on the roads caused by drivers who are 75, 35 and 18.
Well, let's look at that then. So if we're talking about the data, the statistics, once you get to 80, there's roughly 10,000 incidents every year. 2020 was the last data that we have, but it has got worse each year in years before that. We're looking at around 10,000 incidents. We're looking at 200 deaths. We're looking at 2,000 killed or seriously injured. How many people have to die? How many people have to be seriously injured until we say, right, enough is enough?
I'm not sure that those statistics actually add up, because if you have a look at data from the Department of Transport, it says that if you look at the casualty rate amongst drivers, which is the data that they collect, 122 drivers over the age of 70 killed, 118 drivers under the age of 30 were killed. I mean, it's every single one a tragedy.
Well, actually,
but it's pretty much mad.
That actually compounds the issue even more, because you're talking about drivers who had died. I'm talking about victims of the driver. And if you look at that data, I mean, if you add it to that, it's actually a worse picture than what I'm painting today.
Are you saying that the over 75s are more likely to cause harm to themselves or to others than drivers under 21?
Yeah, they are actually. And actually, if you take the categories that come before 75 and above, if you take the 6 age categories before that, add them all together, the over 75s are still worse and account for more casualties than all 6 of those categories put together. If we look at 17-year-olds, yes, they do have accidents, but the curve comes down and down and down as they get older. What we see, what happens when they get to... And actually, it comes down quite steadily. When we get to 75 and above, it shoots up like this. What we find is that a lot, particularly women, actually, give up their licence. It dawns on them that, actually, they're not safe on the roads anymore. We're seeing almost double the amount of men retaining their licences and actually causing more of these casualties, more of these collisions than their women counterparts.
I don't have that data, but what I do have from the RAC Foundation is that number of drivers involved in collisions decreases with age from 30 onwards.
Yes, and there's like a Goldilocks zone, which is between 50 and 75, where it's at an all-time low. We're talking like 200s. But as soon as you get to 75, it shoots up to above 2,000.
Well, so, Neil, sorry to ask, how old are you?
Well, I am 75 years old.
Right, so
he's targeting me.
According to Paul, you've got a whole lot more dangerous on the road.
Well, I've been driving since 1966, 17 years before Paul was born. I've never had an accident. And I think I'm just as good a driver today as I certainly was when I was 17. I was a boy racer at 17. But today, much more experienced, much more mature, much more controlled. And I think I'm a much better driver, although there's much more traffic on the roads today than there was then.
The trouble is, as people look at this story of a 96-year-old who lost control of the car, it mounts a pavement and it devastates the lives of 2 individuals. One is dead and another is injured. And has, I mean, the poor woman is injured, has got this lingering sense of survivor's guilt as well. She's obviously just, you know, it's devastating for everyone. And the person responsible's life and family devastated as well. But people instinctively go, why is someone driving at 96? Because we all know, even without the statistics, we all know as we get older, our eyesight is affected, our mobility is affected, and our reaction time is affected.
Yeah, well, obviously, physical deterioration is an important issue here, but I don't think we should damn entire age groups on the example of one specific case. You might as well say the same thing about 17-year-olds, for example, totally inexperienced on the roads. Testosterone being pumped through their body. 75% of accidents amongst 17 to 24-year-olds are caused by young males. The statistics, I think, are quite unambiguous. For example, 16 to 18-year-olds are 4% of drivers. They cause 9% of all crashes. 65 to 74-year-olds, 13% of all drivers. They cause 7% of all crashes. So the statistics show that older drivers generally are better drivers than younger drivers.
But the 17-year-olds have just taken a test. And if you get to 70, 75, 80, your test was many decades before. And accepting, as you're saying, that everybody's different. There's going to be some 85-year-olds who are still really good physically with it, all that stuff, and some will find it much harder. Should we have a rule which says that as well as renewing your licence, you ought to do a new test every year or every 3 years or every 5 years so that we can differentiate between the 85-year-old who's safe and the 85-year-old who really should not be driving?
Well, why should we restrict this to particular age groups?
No, because you just said that as we age, things change. And look, all of us, we see that in our lives, and you know that's true. So there comes a point where, I mean, if you're a police officer, you have to retire because at a certain point, physically, it's not possible for you to still do the job. If that's true of police officers or firefighters, why isn't it true of 85-year-old drivers?
Well, I don't see that the age really matters in this context because it's a long time since you took your test, for example, I should imagine, and traffic conditions on the roads are far different today from what they were in the 70s, 80s, 90s or whatever. There is an argument for everybody taking driving lessons.
Are you making that argument?
And I'm certainly not making that argument.
It sounded like you were about to.
But to counter the argument with which I'm faced, there are other road safety arguments for people having regular tests.
But that's not the case because Ed actually falls into a category where incidents are at an all-time low. So he certainly shouldn't have to.
Well, the roads are much safer today because cars are safer to drive. There are fewer accidents.
No, I disagree that roads are safer today. There are more signs on the roads today than any other time in history. There are more traffic lights, roundabouts, motorists of all age
groups.
And actually,
cyclists, exactly.
Actually, that's really important because the casualties, when we talk about collisions, we're not talking about vans, cars and buses. Actually, they account for very few collisions. What we're talking about is the most vulnerable. We're talking about pedestrians who don't live in a box that can protect them from the crash. We're talking about cyclists. We're talking about motorbikes. You know, these people are at the greatest risk on the road, and actually motorcycles account for 5 times more casualties, more incidents than the buses, the vans and the cars all put together.
Well, it's all about a question of proportion, isn't it? If we are really interested in stopping deaths on the road, we ban all traffic. In the old days, the Brighton to London car run celebrates the end of the man with the red flag walking in front of a car in 1896.
I mean, look, if you're over 75...
to 4 miles per
Paul,
hour.
can I put something to you
go on
the other side, which is that it would devastate so many families and older people if you took away that independence from drivers over 75. Imagine if you live somewhere in the country where you can't walk to your doctors, your post office, to your supermarket. You don't have the facilities to get any of that online or delivered or whatever. And you need to get in your car. It would increase isolation. It would damage the lives of so many people. It would mean lots of older people would not be able to see their loved ones. You're going to punish so many more people than you're going to help.
There's a lot in there, but the first thing that comes to mind is at least you'll be alive. Because when people get hit by these drivers that shouldn't be on the road, you know, they're dead. That's it. It's over. What we have to
that's such a blunt instrument, though, because the fact of the matter is people die from loneliness.
Well, OK, look, let me deal with the other issues. So what we need to do as a civilised society and actually as an intelligent race is we have to plan for our old age. We have to choose where we're going to live. We have to look towards government and local authorities and say, what are the bus routes? Are there shuttle services? How are we going to be mobile in old age? How are we going to fund that? If you can afford to fund it, running a car is not cheap. Buying a car is not cheap. Insuring it, fueling it.
Moving a house is not cheap either.
Even if you don't get your fervent and burning ambition just to ban it, right? Even if you don't get that, the right thing to do would be to say at a certain age you have to have a new test and do it every 5 years.
Yes, but more than what we did when we were 17. Right. Something more enhanced to test reactions, cognitive ability,
what I think is justifiable is as you get really old, we're talking about a 96-year-old in this particular instance, maybe you should have your doctor to certify that you're medically fit to drive, your eyesight, reactions and so on, that sort of thing.
I can hear the doctor shouting at the screen right now.
They charge a lot of money for it.
But a blanket ban on people on grounds of age seems to me fundamentally wrong. I live in the country, 7 miles from the railway station, where the train brought me to the studio this morning.
That's your choice.
I can't walk 7 miles. Well, I could, I suppose, but it might take me 24 hours to get to the station if I depended on Shanks's pony. And there are tens of millions of people in this country who live in the countryside where there are no buses, there are no trains.
Well, that is an issue that we have to look at.
Yeah. What is interesting is our poll, which we had on screen just then, it's just gone down, showed a rather...
We can bring it back.
We can.
Yeah.
A rather surprisingly large number of people in favour of this all-out ban. I think it was about 30...
Yeah, a third of you say you should have a licence to... should a licence to drive stop at 75? Right. So basically, a third of you want people to stop driving.
That is striking to me. I think it would be lower than that.
Right.
I think we should campaign for a compulsory retest.
Well, I'm not going to join you on that.
No.
And bus routes and shuttle services. And, rather than giving parents childcare vouchers, give elderly people vouchers where they can get to the supermarket.
Interesting. Keep your thoughts coming in. Neil, thank you very much indeed. Paul, thank you very much.
I thought for a second, Neil, that would have been the first time you and I... we almost agreed. Almost. Oh, well, next time.